We're good. So Justin White, please tell us about yourself.
Yeah. Well, first off, before I say anything about myself, I just want to say to the students on the call, like, kudos to you. Just kudos to you, regardless where you're at, whether you're a first year or a senior. I can only imagine. I can't imagine actually what it's been like to navigate college as you're navigating, world-changing events. Especially when a lot of those world-changing events have been trauma-inducing, right? I don't know people's identities and affiliations, but I don't think we got to read the research and know that our young people have really been impacted by what's been happening over these past couple of years, not just COVID, but with continued race-based violence, the political upheaval, and stuff like that. So I want to say kudos to you wherever you're at, whether you know what you want to do after college, if you're still undecided, like, just keep moving forward, keep pushing it. And if you ever need support, please reach out, because part of me, like, one of the reasons I love sociology and being a sociology major, and I didn't declare it till junior year, was because of the support in the family that I felt like. So Katie Lee is a mentor of mine. I have not seen her in a very, very long time, but she was a huge instrumental piece of just my professional and personal growth. She was my supervisor during an internship at Beans and Bread that I did through CCSJ. And I still remember those conversations we had where she was challenging me. She was being compassionate with me as she was like hearing like how I was navigating doing casework and case management. So I hadn't seen her in forever. So to be on this call with her and see her is awesome. And then Dr. Van and Dr. K, way more than professors to me, way more. They are in the inner circle that have molded Justin White. So I really appreciate, being here, and I appreciate all of y'all having this space, because I think this is, cliche, this is a family. So please reach out to them, your professors, your classmates, lean on them, reach out to them at any point in time. All right. So that's all the mushy gushy stuff, right? That's my love language is words of affirmation. So that's all that stuff. So who am I? So the short version of my story is I graduated in 2009, and I've been in high school as an educator at Jesuit high school since then. For the first 8 years, I worked at Cristo Rey Jesuit Baltimore. Shout out to the Hornets, and shout out to the whole Cristo Rey network. So I taught theology for 8 years, and I also ran our community service program at Cristo Rey Jesuit. After those 8 years, I needed a change. I needed a shift. And I always say the Holy Spirit moved me to my next school. I knew I wanted to stay in education, and I knew I wanted to stay in the Jesuit network. And so I went from Cristo Rey. And if you don't know too much about Cristo Rey, East Side, Fells Point area, co-ed, predominantly students of color, and they're working 1 day out of the week to help offset some of the tuition there. So I started teaching there at 21 years old. I was not a education major by any means. I did not want to be a teacher. I remember when I was a junior in high school, I said to my junior English teacher, I never forget this. I said, Mr. Brown, I would never want to be a teacher. I would never want to stand in front of people who don't want to listen to you. And here I am 13 years later, doing it. And I really credit sociology, and I really credit, Jesuit education bringing out that passion in me. So I did Cristo Rey for 8 years. And then I moved to a school. I'm not going to lie. I moved to a school that I never thought I would be at. So I moved to Loyola Blakefield, which is in Towson, Maryland, all boys school. It looks like Hogwarts, like no joke. It looks like Hogwarts, predominantly white. And we have varying economics, but, a lot of affluence there. And so I never kind of saw myself being in a space like that. But when the position opened up that did, I took it. And now 5 years in, I view those students, with the same kind of love and dignity that I viewed my students when I was at Cristo Rey. Because young people, in my opinion, the number one thing young people want is they want to feel like they belong, and they want to feel like they're listened to. And so it doesn't matter socioeconomic, doesn't matter race, doesn't matter political leanings. Young people want to feel like they belong, and they want to be listened to. And that's what I want to do as an educator. So I've been working at Loyola Blakefield for the past 5 years. I've jumped around. At dinner parties, my joke is I'm a Justin of all trades. People give me like little pity laughs. So I have worked in campus ministry as a campus minister. I've helped out with service. I've helped out with our diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives. I've taught psychology. I've taught theology. And this year I'm working in our admissions department. So I've literally just bounced around that campus. But next year, I'm finally going to be the thing that I want to be when I grow up. which is a school counselor. So I'm graduating this May from Loyola with a master's in school counseling, and I'm hoping my next years, the next part of my phase, the next part of my chapter is working with students in school counseling. So that's a little bit about the professional stuff. I think the way, sociology has helped me is it's helping me the same way it helped, 16, 17, 18-year-old Justin. I think sociology has helped me like understand the world and understand like my place in the world a little bit more. So I remember when I took Self and Society with Dr. K, everything just clicked. I was just like, oh, that's why things look that way. Oh, that's why sometimes people say that way. Oh, that's where these values came from. And I was originally a business major, and I was struggling. I was really, really struggling in all of my classes. And when I switched to sociology, my grades were, I was on Dean's List, not to brag or anything like that, because sociology matched more of just like my values and how I wanted to be in the world, but I didn't have the language until I started taking those classes. And so for me now, as an educator and as a budding school counselor, I think sociology has helped me see that regardless of what kind of situation you're in, like there's three things always playing: power, perception, and potential. So whether it's a lesson plan, right? If I walk into a classroom and I'm like, oh, I need to teach students something. Well, that's power. That's saying I have all the knowledge and the students don't have the knowledge. If I change that to, okay, I want my students to experience this, but I want to create the lesson where we're experiencing it together, that's divvying out that power. And then if I say, instead of giving them a definition, let's come up with a definition together, that's giving them more of the power. If I walk into that classroom and I'm not thinking about all the identities that exist in that classroom, whether that's race, socioeconomic, orientation, and I just kind of come in and just go, then I'm not thinking about the different perceptions that students may have to what I'm putting out in front of them. And then last but not least, if I'm not thinking about the outcome, if I'm not thinking about, what I want the students to walk away with, if I'm not thinking about the sustainability of it, then I'm not thinking about the potential. And so sociology has helped me see that regardless of situation, those three things are always at play. And I feel like this degree gave me the tools to kind of understand when they're intersecting, when one area is not, being looked at. DEI is the thing now, right? Everyone is talking about DEI. There's a lot of training. There's a lot of work around it. Unfortunately, there's a lot of performative work around it too. And I think part of that is because those three things aren't looked at. When you're doing a DEI training, who is the person coming up with the training? Who is being invited to the training? Who's coming up with the materials? Are you thinking about how it will be perceived? And then is this sustainable, or are you just doing it as a reaction and not something pragmatic? So I owe a lot to sociology. I wouldn't have been able to do all the things I've done without those tools. And I'm really, really looking forward to what the future holds for me. And it's just awesome to be here. And Dr. Van, I was going to wait till I started. So senior year, I took that seminar with you, and I wrote that paper that was really, really bad. And I've always promised that I was going to rewrite it. My thesis, I'm dedicating to you, because I didn't rewrite the paper, but my thesis is dedicated to you. All right. So I will send it your way. All right. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you a lot. Katie, do you want to take off from there, and then we'll.
Sure, absolutely. I just want to echo what Justin said about your path has not been easy the past several years as students, wherever you are on this road. And I've been very drawn to thinking of where you all must be in this process and things that you have been denied in your Loyola experience, and also knowing how grateful I am that you have been there, because I know what the Loyola community and the Loyola family does for one another. I am the oldest of the three of us, I believe, and my freshman year was 9/11. So I was 2 weeks into undergrad, and the bombing of the World Trade Center happened. And the ensuing 4 years of college held the Iraq War, and with it, Iraq War protests. And so I think often as we look at what is happening in Ukraine, and what I was a witness to and how that formed my 4 years at Loyola, know for each of you that this must be even more intense because of the ways in which we experience all that is happening across the world. And then also knowing that this has come simultaneously during a pandemic that has touched every human in probably a way that nothing else has and hopefully nothing else will, has touched every human on earth and impacted us in such different ways. So to be continuously living trauma while other traumatic events are happening, while you are experiencing what should be some of the, and hopefully will be and are some of the best years of your formation. I am grateful that you guys are all at Loyola and have that community around you. And I couldn't agree more with Justin about the formation of sociology. I similarly was somewhat late. I came in believing that I was going to go into education. I thought I was going to be, so I'm the opposite of Justin. I was convinced I was going to be a math teacher. And so I started heavy in education and math. And while education felt right, the lack of interpersonal experiences of math felt very distant and very isolating. And I think we're formed also just by what was going on in the world around me. It felt very abstract when what I wanted to be doing was building community. And so I similarly kind of looked around and I struggled. I was doing well in education, but I just couldn't make math work. And so I looked around and met Dr. Van and met many of the professors and was formed by I was in a 101 class when the first plane or the second plane hit the towers, the Twin Towers. And I was actually a little early to class. And so it was on, this is going to date me, but there used to be televisions in the corner of each of the rooms. And so we were watching it and people from surrounding offices were in Beatty Hall, and we were watching those moments happen. And it was because of the people who I was around at that moment, and actually it was my Psychology 101 class. And I will never forget feeling drawn to working with people in that moment. And it was during my senior year when my field placement was actually at Beans and Bread. So Beans and Bread in Fells Point was my senior year field placement. And I knew I had done quite a bit of service opportunities working with people experiencing homelessness, and had done the caravan program, which had spent time and just really the essence of being with other humans, the gift of presence, and the importance of hearing people and listening to people and learning their stories and not assuming what made them who they are. And I think that so much of that came from my roots in sociology of wanting to understand the complexities of people and seeing that so much of it was impacted by the world in which they exist. The person in environment is such a foundational concept that we go back to, but it is so essential in every relationship that we will ever create. And so I knew I was really drawn to wanting to work with people experiencing homelessness, and that's what I knew. And I kept bumping into during my field placement, kind of seeing people who were doing work that I wanted to do and were just interacting with the world in ways that I wanted to be able to think about and address systemic issues. And I asked what degrees they had. And over and over and over again, I kept hearing, I have a master's in social work. I started in sociology. I went on and got my MSW because of an internship like this. And so that's what I did. My sociology degree launched me perfectly into an MSW program, and found myself when I graduated from Fordham. So I went to a different Jesuit school for my MSW, and had an opportunity to return to beans and bread. So to return to where my field placement was. And it was because of those relationships and the experiences of learning about the systems within Baltimore. I don't have roots in Baltimore. I'm from Massachusetts. That is home to me, and that's where everything, all of my roots were. But I fell in love with the endearingness of Baltimore and began to learn about and understand the systems and the decisions that were made that kept this city to have this ivory towers of Hopkins and Loyola sit directly next to York Road and West Baltimore, and Northwest Baltimore. And the uniqueness of Baltimore is always that one block in any direction really changes the makeup. And one of the things I will never forget is that people less than 2 miles apart from each other, from Northwest Baltimore to the area around Loyola, have a 20-year difference life expectancy just by those zip codes. 21215 as opposed to the 21212 immediately around Loyola is a 20-year life expectancy difference. And so those are roots in sociology that I needed to understand, and I needed to know why the people who made up Baltimore for me were treated so differently by the systems that were built around them and built in response to wanting to cast out and marginalize people. And so recently I then went on to spend 9 years at Healthcare for the Homeless at the bottom of 83. So I am a clinical social worker. I do have a clinical license. And it was from my time at Healthcare for the Homeless at HCH that I started to look nationally at some of the systems level impact and policy. So with that same sociology route, I now work on the policy team for the National Healthcare for the Homeless Council, and have spent the past almost 2 years looking at healthcare policy impact at health centers that serve people experiencing homelessness. So I have, and I was sharing with Dr. K prior to this that as I joined, that I've used more of my sociology roots in the past 18 months at the council, as we've had the opportunity to really look at the events that are happening as a result of COVID, particularly for people experiencing homelessness, and find opportunities to develop research based on what is happening. One of the great things now that is so different than really ever before is the speed and the ways in which we can capture data, and that while we may not know how we want to use it, there is so much information in interactions that we can capture and then use to inform policy decisions. So I will say, from looking at, one of the big things that we have looked at are the housing interventions for people experiencing homelessness as a result of the pandemic. So most jurisdictions made this decision to put people in hotels because congregate living we didn't know much about COVID at the beginning, but we knew that close contact and people living on top of each other was no way to prevent or to address public health spread concerns. Turns out it's also not actually a way that people should live anyways. But we finally had some opportunity and policy, and most importantly, some federal money to put people in hotels and then track what their outcomes are. And the research that has come from this is absolutely amazing to see. And it is all sociology. And just as Justin mentioned, so essential to all of this is this equity lens through which we need to implement and change every policy that currently exists. Homelessness is a creation of our systems. It is very intentional. We keep it that way as a society. It is in no way anybody's fault that they are experiencing homelessness, but the structural inequities that exist and the systemic racism has never been more clear than as we've looked at this pandemic, where people of color have been disproportionately impacted by this illness in ways that we will not be able to correct for generations because of the number of people that have been lost. And it is the sociology lens that is going to help change and inform and hopefully correct some of these systemic inequities to move towards a way of really of creating reparations and really just looking at how we will create equity within healthcare. So one thing that I would just kind of leave with is I cannot speak more highly for the opportunities that a sociology degree affords you, and where it can lead you to, it can be connected to different things. As I said, I kind of found what I wanted to do before I realized what path would get me there. It wasn't just from sitting in a class that I was able to identify. I didn't know social work. It was not as discussed and well respected in the early 2000s, but sociology gave me that path forward for it. And it can be applied in schools. It can be applied in healthcare. It is essential in the operations for large organizations in the business world to be considering the ways in which things such as equity to what our social impacts are. There is a place for you at every table that you want to be at. So I encourage you to not be limited by even just by what we say, although I will gladly loop anyone, I will hook anyone and tell you that an MSW is the most amazing degree. But I will say that there is a place for you with your sociology degree at every table, and that you should be making sure people make space for you because of the knowledge and, more importantly, the perspective and approach that you take. You are learning how to think analytically and to view the world in ways that many other majors do not consider. They're starting to, but we've been doing it, and your professors have been thinking like this and teaching these methods for so much longer than many of these others who are introducing it as you must check it off as a box and have a conversation or a one class that meets this equity requirement, whereas it is ingrained and interwoven in everything that you learn and will make you an invaluable team member at any table, whatever it is that you might decide you want to do.
Thank you. That was inspiring. I want to take sociology now. Mark.
Me too. I want to come back and do it. Do we get like another one? After so many years, you can say it's been 20 years since I've been there. Do I get another couple rounds?
We could talk about doing like a Zoom masterclass occasionally. That'd be kind of fun. Having faculty talk about research and stuff like that.
Love it.
It was a serious answer.
And then we'll go to questions.
I want to go back to college. I don't want this. I don't want this real learning. So my name is Mark. I graduated in 2008. I am a tactical analyst for the federal government. I work for a federal law enforcement agency focusing on counterterrorism. So a little different vein of the sociology major. It's funny when Justin and Katie were talking about classes. It's funny, I was writing them down, just remembering. I came in undecided. I didn't know what I didn't even know what sociology was. I think I came in like everybody, like, oh, biology, I'm good at science, I'll be a doctor or something like And then it just was not, it wasn't what I expected, you know. It was more of a fast track for, hey, let's try to pump out some doctors, and I'm sure a lot of you guys had had that experience. And then I minored in theology because, you know, growing up Catholic, I felt like God would smite me if I didn't take Catholic classes at Loyola. So I ended up with that. And I took the Self and Society class with Dr. Conradi. I think it was, might have been one of your first years teaching because you were new. And I was like, wow, this is for me. This is it. Everything like clicked, like Justin was saying. It just made sense, the micro sociology. And, you know, we were talking about, you know, social breaching and all that other stuff. And it just really focused on me. The macro I didn't like so much. I appreciate it, but it doesn't speak to me. So that class was fantastic. And then I had to wait because we did not, from there was a criminology class, but it wasn't offered every semester and it wasn't even offered every year. And so I took Dr. Conradi. I think you started teaching from Dr. Keene, one of the criminology classes, one of the intros, because I think she taught one of the advanced ones. And that was a fantastic class. And a little anecdote about that, that was the first time that I read like a journalistic article from an unreliable author. And we were reading about broken windows theory from NYPD's perspective from Commissioner Bill Bratton, right? I don't know if you still teach that or if that's still looked at. But it was fascinating because you're reading it, you're like, oh, this makes perfect sense. This is really, and then you're like, but this doesn't work. And you had to give us context of then reading the alternate theory of really developing their critical theory of like, and the critical reading of, you know, just because it's written down doesn't mean it's true, and you need to dig deeper. And what's funny is I had a supervisor this past year that actually, she's an NYPD detective, and she had a framed picture of Bill Bratton on her desk when she retired. And you know, it's different. It's still floating around. It still hangs out there. And then Dr. Van, I got to give you a shout out because I took the gender studies class, and that was probably the first time, and she remembers that I was really challenged significantly. And we can get into some other things later, but you know, me being a straight white male, upper middle class at Loyola in the Mid-Atlantic region, you know, my recollection of that class was a lot of people had the experience of, oh, this is what normal is, and that doesn't apply to me because I'm not a male, or I'm not white, or I'm not, you know, granted I'm Catholic, but I'm not, you know, Protestant or whatever. And it was like, oh wait, that is me. But then seeing everyone around me, realizing, okay, that is everybody else's experience, and kind of stepping out of my shoes and realizing, hey, there's an alternate perspective to this that you don't understand. And Dr. Van, I don't know if you remember this, but I did not do well in that class. And that was my learning experience, because I'm not supposed to get that because it's not my experience. And that was by far the worst class I ever had in college, because it was, you know, not my experience. And that was a learning experience for me. But then also being a privileged white male, graded on the curve, it's still bumped up to a B-. So thanks for that, Dr. Van. I appreciate you perpetuating the system with that. So I don't know what everybody's interest is. I think we can get into that in a question and answer session later. I don't want to speak too much about topics that you may not be interested in. When I've spoken before, not a lot of students are necessarily interested in government or kind of extremism, but I just wanted to hit some high points of things that you will get from a sociology degree, and especially a liberal arts degree at Loyola, that you may not have thought about. So when we had a career night my senior year, we had a lot of professionals that came in that worked all different areas. Some ended up in business, some actually ended up in private practice. I did not realize at the time that as a sociology, like social worker, if you worked in private practice, that you could make some real money. And since then I've actually had experience where people saving up, building their own private practice. And, you know, if that's something that interests you, something that, you know, can be a very fulfilling career, but also one that's very lucrative. I did not realize that at the time. And so the career night was very beneficial for me to hear that. Obviously, I didn't end up like that. I work for the government. But there's just a lot you can do with this degree. One of the most important things that I've seen professionally is just writing and communication skills. You'd be shocked at how just writing an email, being able to communicate in prose and like written form, how that is severely lacking in the professional world. Obviously, that's something that you get with, trying to communicate your ideas in a sociology degree that you may not necessarily get somewhere else, but that's something that you really don't think about necessarily when you're applying to a job or working through something, is just the communication skills that you have working in this major. On top of that, is group projects. So I used to do recruiting for us, and we would actually come around to Loyola and some other schools. And you may think, well, what do I do in college? This almost feels like high school when I'm forced to work with people I don't know in the class and pair up. And I remember Dr. Conradi, we did a group project about designing your own like criminal justice police force. What would that look like with community policing, the broken windows, or that type of stuff. We had to do a group project. I forget whose class it was for, but for mine, we did like social breaching, and we went to the mall and like we're like close talking with people, and just how uncomfortable that made just the normal people. That might have been the Self and Society. I don't remember.
Yeah, it was Self and Society.
Self and Society.
I walked the opposite way on the bridge.
Yeah, walking the opposite side.
Yeah.
In an elevator facing the wrong direction elevator. I still do that to freak people out at work. But what's interesting is when we hire and we're looking to hire college graduates, recent college graduates, understanding that you may not have all that professional experience, that other experience definitely comes into play. So just remembering like, okay, what did I do? What was the problem that I identified? How do I solve it? And not what did my group do, but what did I do within my group is essential. That is essential stuff that we look for. And I kind of even bring up to this day when I'm doing interviews. And then the last thing I'll mention, just a shout out to Loyola, is really use career services. I was interviewed and got my job through career services. And just refreshing my resume and that type of stuff. Career services is really beneficial. Take those classes, work on those resume writing samples, because resume writing is an art and it is terrible in the real world. It is horrific how bad some of the resumes that you see are. And I actually got my placement, and you really got to trust them, but I got my placement where I am from my experience. I studied abroad in Japan. I don't know if they still have the trade program with Sophia University in Tokyo, but I just did a summer semester, and I studied actually Japanese society, which is a sociology class. But that was one of the things that I put on my resume that popped, that made them pull my resume. That kind of ended up with my pretty good placement. And we can get into that a little later, but it was just little things like that that really, really worked out. And the last thing that I'll say is really, especially for the undergrads, is take advantage of what Loyola has to offer. Do they still do the sophomore experience? Seeing basic nodding, not seeing any nodding from current students. I'm going to assume that's a no, or nobody did that. But it was a good experience. And that was really good at discerning, it's how they talk about discernment and everything, the Jesuits, about really like, okay, is this really what I want to do? Is this a good fit for me? So that's all I have. I have some other notes written down, but really I think that's just the wave tops of like really, I mean, like we all said before, sociology degree, really beneficial, not just for what you automatically think of like necessarily going to social work or being a teacher like Justin said, but in my career field where we have a little bit of everybody, it's essential for getting the job done. So that's all I have.
That's like a tagline: sociology, essential for getting the job done. There you go.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. So questions?
I have a question for Katie. I was just wondering, so I'm kind of considering doing an MSW after I graduate. I'm a junior right now. But I guess, how did you know? I'm not sure if you went like right after you graduate Loyola, or how did you know like when to go, I guess, or also how did you know that you want to go there, I guess, exactly? I know you touched on it a little, but thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would say I did go immediately after, and that's because of my internship. So I would say, great thing about being a junior is you have this opportunity, and hopefully it will be in a world that is a little bit more normal, and you'll have the opportunity to really get into places, and actually experience work setting environments and get to interact with other professionals. Because I would say that's really how it was, is that I kind of kept seeing people that were part of my internship experience that had MSWs. And so, one of the best things that when you intern, generally you are a jack of all trades, a master of none. And so they'll send you to meetings, or you'll have this opportunity to just kind of interact with a whole bunch of different people. So that's really where I even learned about Masters in Social Work. It was not incredibly well known, and was, it was a lot of people went the psychology or the PsyD route, get a doctorate in psychology, but it didn't have the whole person approach and the kind of holistic perspective that sociology does. And so that was what made me make the decision to go. And there's so many different ways to do it now. And there are definitely a lot of work opportunities that will provide some compensation to allow you to go back to school. So that is something that, depending on, what your goals are and what, resources you have available to you immediately after, that is a great way to defer it. So Fordham was such a great program because there was a ton of non-traditional students. A lot of them worked for the Department of Social Services in New York City, and they were paying for their degree as long as they worked a certain number of years post graduation for the Department of Social Services. So I had always thought that I was going to do AmeriCorps or the Peace Corps immediately after Loyola, but because I knew what I wanted, I was so excited about it that I didn't want to wait. And so that's kind of what made me choose to go immediately after. I would say, as with anything in life, there's a lot of good to taking a year or 2 years between and getting some experiential learning. School never gets easier, like life happens. And so it doesn't necessarily get easier to go back to get a master's. I'd love Justin to chime in here on this, because he's doing it not immediately post Loyola. But I will say my biggest recommendation is only do it if you know it's what you want. I think it is better to go and get do experiential learning after graduating if you are not 100% sure that it is what you want to do, because it is one thing that I love about it is that it is an incredibly versatile degree and can be applied in a lot of different settings. But it is also not necessary, depending on where you want to be. So only do it if you are 100% sure, and maybe not 100%. I don't think maybe you can be 100% about anything in life, but I would not recommend, do not discount what an experience would do to help you solidify what path you want to be on if you're not positive.
Thank you so much.
Oh, sorry if someone was gonna ask
No, go
something,
ahead.
but the question I have, I'm asking because when I've gone to apply for jobs, and I've gotten interviews and stuff, they always ask about my sociology major, and they kind of make it sound like they're not impressed with it, that they're looking for a different major. And so I always get weird questions about it, and I never know how to answer. Like I always try and just be like, oh, like it's taught me good listening skills because of like the seminar format, and it's like allowed me to public speak and like writing skills, but I never like know if that's like the right thing to like be taking from everything. So I don't know. This is like a question to everyone, I guess.
So I would say, I mean, I think, I guess, let me ask you what jobs you're applying for, if you don't mind sharing with the group.
Yeah, like a ton, because I have no idea what I want to do. So like right now I'm doing the Disney college program, which is like only 6 months. So
Okay.
I have that. But like before I was applying for like marketing jobs and like random like career launch stuff at like Fidelity, like just like things that like casting my net wide just to see what was out there. And then I ended up like getting the Disney one, so I did that. But like, so I guess I was applying to like all of them. Like,
So I would say, when they say sociology, most people don't know what sociology means, right? It's like an academic discipline, and it's not a feeder program into something else. So that's why I wanted to write it down, because when I was doing interviews and some of the things is that, like, you really want to hammer on, you know, yes, it's a sociology degree, but I'm not an academic. No offense, Dr. Moretti, Dr. Van. Actually, I'm kind of waiting to see Dr. Van's like house start shaking, because I'm sure she's running around like Europe somewhere, like talking to people that are getting bombed out or saving somebody or something like that. I know she did her study abroad or her stuff in Prague, but you're really selling the idea that, like, I'm a people person, right? I understand people. I can talk to people. But I can also communicate and write. And it's not that I can go and party and hang out and talk to anybody. It's no, but I can apply this academically and as a discipline about it. So I can study data, I can understand data, but also, you know, I can work in a group, right? I can make presentations. Just a side note, my brother he went to UPenn, he graduated cinema studies and economics major, and he went to work for Macy's, because we graduated in 2008, which was like the financial downturn, right? And then he got a master's degree from NYU Stern in the business school, and now works for Salesforce, which is he's a data scientist for Salesforce. He still makes PowerPoints and does slide decks, just like everybody else. His job and my job are, I don't want to say similar, because he has that coding element that I don't have. But it's really, the world's almost flat for what the corporate world kind of looks at. So that's what I would say, is you want to sell yourself in that sense of, like, you know, I'm an academic, but also I can talk to people, because you'd be amazed. Like you said, you got the Disney job. Disney's a very difficult job to get, right? Disney is a very difficult place to get in the door. And so that's already a step ahead, right? So you're building that experience, and that's how you want to sell yourself, right? Is that I can talk to people, I can write, I can communicate, that whole stuff, as opposed to like, oh, I'm good with numbers. No offense to that, but Dr. Gray, are we still recording? You want
Yeah, I
to
can
keep
turn it
recording this
off if
stuff?
you'd like.
Share some
I
more
can-
stories.
Okay, I can turn it off. I'll stop it now.